Okay, good evening, everybody. My name's Don Davis. I'm the leader of North Somerset Council. Thank you for taking part in this Facebook Live. Can I introduce my colleagues who are also on the call? I've got Mark Caniford.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Councillor Mark Caniford. I'm the Executive Member responsible for business, economy and employment, and a few other things which I'll answer if there are any questions tonight.
Okay. And Ash Cartman.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Ash Cartman. I'm the Executive Member for the Council's Finances.
And we've got Jeff Richardson.
Hi, I'm Jeff Richardson. I'm Assistant Executive for Highways and Transport.
Okay, and Nicola Holland.
Hello, I'm Councillor Nicola Holland. I'm Assistant Executive responsible for community engagement, North Somerset Together and Town and Parish Liaison.
Thank you. And we've also got Matt Lenny, our Director of Public Health. And I wonder, Matt, after you introduce yourself, if you just want to do an update as to where we are in terms of the health situation more generally.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Matt Lenny. I'm Director of Public Health. Happy to give a bit of an update on the latest numbers around coronavirus. So just to confirm that we're having a continued fall in cases. It's slowing down a bit, but we've made huge progress since our peak of over 300. Which was about a week into the national lockdown. We're now down at 113 per 100,000, which is below the national average, which is a change over the last week or so. The national average is 151 per 100,000, but we are still above the Southwest regional average, which is just under 80 per 100,000. Also encouragingly, we're seeing less cases in our older age population, which was of concern a few weeks ago because they're obviously most vulnerable to the virus, can have the most serious consequences in terms of hospitalisation or serious issues. And our test positivity rate, which is a measure of how many people turn positive who are tested, that's also fallen significantly over recent weeks from a high of about 8.8% to now down to 4.3%. And generally, the national guidance is if you get below 5%, that's a good indicator that the virus is circulating less quickly in your community. So important to say a big thank you to everybody for working with both national lockdown and the Tier 3 guidance that's in place at the moment. We are seeing some impact. We still have some situations to manage in care homes, in schools and some workplaces, but the volume of those cases is coming down. And hopefully we'll see that continue over the coming days. Not sure if that's okay, Don, for a general introduction.
I think that was yes, but you're on mute, Don, so you're wasting your time.
Sorry, I was going to say thank you, Matt. I was wondering whether you could just outline the change in arrangements around Christmas time.
So just to remind people that we're still in Tier 3 arrangements at the moment, and the guidance is still on the gov.uk website. You can see all the detail there about what that means, and we're living with that at the moment, so hopefully that's quite clear. The change in national guidance for all the administrations, so that's for England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, is that between the 23rd and 27th of December, people are allowed to move more freely, but only to form a bubble of up to 3 households and to stick with that bubble throughout your Christmas celebrations with family or friends. So, but people are free to move under those circumstances. I think what I would say is what the Chief Medical Officer and others have said nationally is just because you can do something doesn't mean you have to do it. So have those conversations with your family, with your friends about the level of risk that you're willing to tolerate essentially over Christmas, because when we get together, the virus spreads. That's just a simple fact. And I suppose it's being honest with yourselves and each other about the fact that coming together, any one person could be infected with the virus, quite often unknowingly, because lots of people carry it without any symptoms. But you need to think about, would you be able to sort of work with the consequences of that, particularly if there was a more vulnerable person in your bubble, whether that's an older relative or somebody with a long-term condition. So we have the ability to have more mixing, but I think we need to use that very carefully and please have those conversations and be really clear about what you think is appropriate for everybody in the family group.
Thank you, Matt. And I would say that from my own personal point of view, we're having those difficult conversations currently within our own family about what we should do. I appreciate it is difficult for people, but I think we need to look to the longer term as well, because clearly we very much like to be celebrating Christmas with all our family again next year as well as this year. So thank you for that, Matt. Now, the first question I've got is come from Sam Walker. And Sam says, can you tell us a bit more about the new spacebar unit in the Sovereign Centre in Weston-super-Mare? It says making business digital on the side. I'm interested in this project and any other digital projects. So I guess, Mark Hannaford, could you answer that one?
Yeah, thanks, Don, and thanks, Sam. That's a great question. I think it's, you know, I think you are partly aware of what the space bar is about, but I think there's obviously some areas which I could probably enlighten you on. The college and the council have linked together to create an opportunity for their very, very skilled HE students, higher education students, to help business in the high street, or businesses in Weston generally, become digital, get online. It's a reflection of the first lockdown, and it was understood that most of our businesses simply don't have, or our independent businesses don't have, an online presence. So this is an opportunity for those very highly skilled students who can't really get out to the workplace any longer for experience, because big companies aren't working from offices, to actually enhance their skills by actually working with lots of local businesses. So if you are a business like yourself, Sam, you can actually ask the Space Bar and the college group to help you build your online presence. They will help you with your whole package in terms of how it's going to work, how people are going to pay for goods and deliveries, etc. And they will help you create that online presence for your business. Now, what we really want is lots and lots of businesses in Weston coming forward to do that, because one thing we do know is online is now a major part of retailing. Retailing isn't simply going to the shops. Now, it's great. We love people going to the shops. We love people in our high streets, but high streets are changing. And that is not going to change again anytime soon. They are going to be places where you can shop, where you can eat, where you can have tea, meet your friends, coffee, etc. But you still can buy your goods from those places, even if you don't want to go into town. And that's how we have to change. So a great digital opportunity for people to set up their online presence. Go in there, speak to the young people in there. There will be also some lecturers with them, so you don't need to worry. These people are highly skilled. So they're not going to be making a muck-up of anything you want. You will be impressed.
Thank you, Mark. I mean, I do think that the whole online process has been very clearly pushed by North Somerset, within North Somerset and the communities there, to get more people involved, to enable businesses to offer online. I don't know if any of my colleagues here have got any personal experience within their own towns of any of our online offers.
It must be said, Don, I'll just say, Nailsy have done an absolute superb job. I'm aware, it's been brought to my attention. I've had a look, and I think the businesses in Nailsy, even without this level of help, have done an absolutely cracking job on getting online. I'm aware Clevedon are at it now, and I believe Portishead are coming online fairly soon, but Nicola might be able to give us a little bit more detail on that.
Okay. Thank
Not
you.
much more in the way of detail, but yes, it is happening in Portishead. I mean, individual businesses getting online as it stands, but yes, we are getting together.
Okay, I've got some questions coming through. On the same business process, I'm being asked by Sam, but anything help for the self-employed? He's an owner of a small forest school, and his income has been very badly affected because of COVID. Anything on business support? That'd be you again, Mark?
That will be me again. Yes, so another Sam, was it? If everyone's going to be called Sam.
Different Sam. A different
different Sam, but that'll make it easier if everyone's called Sam. So in terms of business support, Sam, you must make sure you look at the self-employed furlough, because I'm assuming you are self-employed, and you get to your income that way. But you are entitled, everyone is entitled who has seen a significant reduction in their business to apply to the ARG grants. Now, if you go onto the North Somerset website, on the front page, you've got business and support. Go into there and you'll get some explanation. Now, the only thing with these grants, they are caveated by government that they must support business costs and not your income. Your income has to be gathered via self-employed furlough, or by the Works and Pensions Department. So in terms of expenses to your business, if you have insurances and a vehicle and your communications, you can go through the ARG grants to try and recover some of that money. So that's a fairly easy process. Have a look. If you get stuck with any of that and you're concerned, it's Ash Cartman and myself who pick up those issues, and we will do what we can to help you get through that process. So just apply. That's what we want you to do.
Lovely. Ash, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think Mark summed it up perfectly. Just please apply is what I'd say.
Lovely. Okay. Now, I've got a couple of questions here on tiers, Matt, and this is TIER as opposed to TEARS. And I'm going to add them together. I've got one from Dave, I've got one from Kimmy, and I've got one from Adam. Adam is annoyed we're still in tier 3, and why are we so reliant on hospitals in Bristol? Kim is asking, are we going to change our tier? And Dave is asking, can we stop day trippers visiting our towns and bringing COVID? I don't think possibly the last one is a straightforward answer. I guess that works all ways, and there are restrictions. But in terms of the tier change, Matt, have you got any help on that one?
Yeah, sure, Don. So the tier change, we know that it's a national decision. So the information and the guidance about the types of information the government is looking at has been published as part of the overall winter plan that was announced by the Prime Minister a few weeks ago. So there are some indicators in there which has things like our rate per 100,000, in the over 60 age category, our test positivity, and whether our cases are increasing or decreasing, plus a look at the wider health and social care system. So what are the pressures on not just hospitals, but our care providers as well, and within primary care. So it's an overview of the types of cases that are out there and the complexities that are involved. So that information will be reviewed by national government rather than by ourselves. So it's a separate process to us, and we will just have to wait for that information to be gathered together and considered at various groups within national government. So that will have input from colleagues in Public Health England as well, advising on all the epidemiology, all the data, the trends, the analysis, all of those sorts of things. But then they'll take wider soundings about the situation in our healthcare system and any other factors they think are important. So I can understand people are keen to know why we are where we are now and where we might be in the future. I suppose we are where we are because the government have made a decision, and that's fine. We respect that, and we're trying to support our community to live within the tier 3 arrangements as effectively as possible. And then we will know on about the 16th of December what the decision is about whether we'll have any change. And what we do know is that if there was a change announced on about the 16th of September, it's likely to be implemented from Saturday the 19th of December, so just before Christmas. But at this stage, it's very hard to say whether there will be any change, either for us as a local authority or indeed other local authorities across the system after 2 weeks. But we'll obviously report that out. We'll share details on our website, on our social media, everywhere we can as soon as we know what the details are, if that's not already out there via the national media. I think the most important thing is the preparations we're making to anticipate either a continuation of the tier 3 arrangement or a potential change if that happened down to tier 2, and making sure we're ready to support with messages out to our communities, support for businesses, and all of the other important stakeholders we have, like schools, care homes, those sorts of environments. So that's where we are. We'll wait for the national decision, but we'll be ready to try and support people as effectively as we can.
You're on mute, Don.
Don.
Sorry, I shouldn't keep on mute. Matt, we're in a tier 3 area in North Somerset, and the advice is you shouldn't travel out of a tier 3 area unless it's absolutely necessary for work or for education or health reasons. Therefore, a question I've been asked by William about travelling to another part of Somerset over Christmas. What guidance would you give him? I guess it's as you say, it's the risk assessment piece. If it's during the window, isn't it?
Yes, if it's during the window, then a wider travel is permitted. But again, I would just encourage people to think carefully about that, about how far they want to travel and what additional risks that might put into, them in terms of exposure of other places. Particularly for those people on long journeys, if you're having to stop along the way in terms of motorway service stations or other places, you'll be coming into contact with different groups of people all the way along that journey. And there may be unknown risk that it's hard for you to mitigate when you're in that environment, especially as if a lot of people are moving at that time. I suspect things like motorway service stations could be quite busy. So once you start to have a lot of people funneled into that type of environment, which hasn't been designed to be COVID secure, and there are pinch points, anyone who's, you can think about those corridors and things as you, move towards toilets or certain bits of shops or restaurants. Quite often you're pushed into quite a tight space. So, rehearse all of that. Think about what time you might travel. Think about how you might mitigate some of that risk by filling up at home and maybe taking as much with you as you can for the journey and only stopping when it's essential. So it's that sort of forward planning which will help.
Okay, thanks. I've now got a couple of questions on parking, one from Kimberly and one from Christina. They understand that Saturdays are free. I guess that's talking about Weston-super-Mare. And they're both asking about whether we should make more days free to encourage people to come into the town centre. But clearly, of course, we're going to encourage them to come in by walking or cycling as part of our active transport policy initially. But any more comments, Jeff?
Well, obviously, we've made it free on Saturday afternoons in some restricted car parks, which obviously is to try and help all businesses that have been really struggling during this time. What we don't want to do is to extend that at the moment, because basically we still have a balance between the safety of people and encouraging them to get into the shops. We're reviewing it all the time, so it's possible we could change it, but unlikely.
Thank you. And I've got one from Laszlo here. He says, good evening. I would like to ask about electric vehicle charge in Weston-super-Mare. As more and more new electric cars are becoming available and sales are rising, can we expect more charges being placed in the town in the near future?
Sorry, go on, Jeff.
Well, I'm not aware of any going into Weston-super-Mare. I know they're actually going into Portishead, and we're actively talking about introducing some more into Clevedon. I don't know if Mark knows about anything happening in Weston, because I've not heard yet.
Ash, do you want to answer something first, and then I'll come in after you?
Sorry, Jeff, to come in. I just say I've had in my role as finance indications of some money that central government have they're looking to distribute for on-street parking, because obviously if you've got your own off-street parking, that's okay. And then so we'll be looking at that, but that's not going to be in the near future. That'll be a year or two away, I would have thought, and might involve things like using lampposts and their electric supply and having designated spaces for electric vehicles. But we're still some way off that. That a pot of money has only just been announced.
Thank you, Ash. Did you have anything more to say, Jeff?
Yeah, I was just about to say that obviously this has been brought to our attention. I've had quite a few things in my mailbox recently about the very thing that Ash is talking about, that people who don't have access from their house to charge electric cars are in a difficult position. And obviously, as we move forward to 2030, and you're not allowed to buy a diesel or a petrol car, then more and more people are going to need to be able to charge their cars, not necessarily at their house. So the money from the government would be very welcome. And I think it needs some kind of national review of how this is going to happen.
I mean, I would completely agree with you all there, because I think within our current local plan process, which should take us through to then 2038, I think we need to. This is a really good point, Laszlo, you've raised, because the desire is there for electric vehicles, but clearly we have to get some power into them to recharge those batteries. And I do think that we need to pay particular attention to that within our local plan making process about how we would achieve this. And I guess the big challenge to us is retrofitting, isn't it? Because if I take some of the centre of Weston-super-Mare, it's not easy to immediately put a lot of electric charging points for the people who live just on the outskirts of the high street. And as you quite rightly say, the government is saying, as in 10 years' time, you can no longer buy anything other than a hybrid or an electric vehicle. So clearly the pressure is going to be on, certainly with that local plan process. And again, I guess the infrastructure of getting enough electricity to do the charging into our towns and villages then comes on. So it's a national issue, but it's very much local as well. So thank you for that. I've had, I'm sorry, just forgive me, I'm looking off screen. I'm trying to capture the questions. And I've had a question from Rich, who's been talking about our leisure centres. Now, he's made a very valid point around the fact that they are run by contractors under arrangements with ourselves, and we have put some money into supporting them. And I don't know if perhaps Ash, you want to make any comments around the leisure support. I mean, I think it's the question, of course, is that if we don't support them, then effectively we will have the burden of premises which are empty and not fulfilling any task in the future around supporting our leisure needs. So I don't know if you want to make any comments as the finance side of it, Ash. You're on mute. You're getting as bad as me.
Yeah, I know. So I think that there's two kind of aspects to this. When I looked at it, I don't know if the gist of the question was, why are we supporting, third-party private businesses? Yes. And I had that thought completely. So that we followed the thinking through and said, well, let's assume we didn't, and what would happen? Well, then we would have all these leisure centres come back to us, and then we'd have to support them, and then there'd be costs associated with that. And there are other kind of legal implications of that. And then there's also the public health aspect, is that we want to have the fastest possible route back to reopening them. So what we've done is we've got into an arrangement to support them that is actually cheaper for us, we believe, than actually taking them back and leaving these third parties to kind of fend for themselves. And we're also, in terms of providing that support, we've also got arrangements that we are able to influence when they open and the commercial aspects of it, so we can balance, if you like, the taxpayer interest and the public health interest, because they're finely balanced between the two, about when we open. And obviously later is possibly better for health, but earlier is better for the taxpayer. So we're keeping that under review. I think with some of them, we've taken the advantage to close for a longer period and actually undertake some work, because we own these buildings. So Backwell's a good example of that. Rather than have it half opened for some time, we're going to close it, do some work that will actually extend the life. It's quite cost effective to do that. So across the board, we're continuing to watch it and putting the minimum amount of money we need to really to keep the health centres open for people in North Somerset.
Thank you. I've got a question from John. He said this is another business support, so perhaps Ash and Mark, this will be for you. Can ARG cover those of us that have been closed since the beginning of March? Because he seems to feel the government have pretty much written them off.
Excuse me. Yeah, it is pretty tough, John. It's one of the problems is the government have set certain criteria around all these loans. If you can prove that you are still trading, that your business hasn't closed down, then you can still apply through the ARG grant. If of course your business has closed, then the government has made it very clear that if the council pay out anything to businesses that have actually now finished, they will claw that money back from the local taxpayer. So we do have to have some check in place. Now, if you have been closed because of this, and I'm assuming you aren't a business rate payer in the business you run, otherwise you would have already had a grant, but that doesn't exclude you from the discretionary grants that North Somerset can pay out. But there will be some checks on. In terms of what those grants are for, those grants are very clearly for your costs. They aren't for your income. Your income has to be done. And if you've only just started your business, and I think someone else mentioned the fact that they've only been in business in a short term, we're really aware of that. And I think the government have quite clearly left a big, not intentionally, I don't necessarily believe, but a big hole in the net where newly self-employed people keep falling through. But we can help with some cost covering. We can't help with income. That has to be universal credit or via the furlough schemes.
Okay. Ash, did you want to make any further comment? Okay. And Mark, just in case anybody's just joining the call now, would you just like to clarify again where they can make applications for grants?
So, and I would like, if people are on the call and they have business contacts, can they please make sure any friends they have or other people they know get hold of these grants, because it is really important that we pay them out on several fronts. First of all, with the one which is based around council tax payments, if we don't pay that out to North Somerset businesses, it goes back to the government. So we quite clearly, as local representatives, all of us, want our businesses to put that money in their business and to make sure they get through to next spring, when hopefully we'll have a resolution to COVID. But so if you go on to the North Somerset page, website, it is on the front page. Look at business and support, click on there, and it will lead you into the In North Somerset, which is a business pages, where you can then scroll down and find the grants that you require for small business. Like I say, if you get stuck, Ash and I are both willing to take and have a look at what your problems are, but there are a set of criteria that we can't get around, but we can certainly advise whether you're entitled. So, for example, quickly, as I don't want to take any more time, even taxi drivers have had support, and they have to prove that they have got a cost. But we have supported taxi drivers because they, again, like many other people, like John clearly has lost a lot of their business, and it's going to be really hard to recover from that. But we do need to make sure our economy recovers in the new year, and we're here to help you do that.
Don, just before you go on to the next question, I just thought it might be worth mentioning, in view of the question before last, that we've just put in place a sport and leisure facilities strategy around all the leisure facilities we keep in North Somerset, and that's the first one there's ever been. So we are serious about keeping leisure going in North Somerset.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for reminding me of that, Jeff. Yes, I mean, that was passed this afternoon, but that will be the key item then to drive the detail down, to get some of the individual areas which have got poor provision at the moment, the opportunity to get funding into those, to provide those in the future. So thanks for reminding me. I've got a question here from Mike, and I'm going to ask it, and I may well be asking and have to say we'll go back to Mike in due course. He's saying, is North Somerset Council going to put any pressure on St Modwyn to push forward with building the planned shops at Locking Parklands, which continually delayed and get changed into houses? Now, I don't know if anybody on this call can answer that question. I think we're going to have to take that one away, Mike. Yeah. I mean, from my own bitter experience within Pill, very many years ago, we had a housing development which was going to have a pub and a shop and all sorts of facilities, and over time none of them materialized, and I hope that we've learned some of the lessons from that type of thing, but we'll have to take that one and come back to you. You're asking me another question as well, Mike, which is, are the council already aware of any further plans for Virgin Meter to connect and cable up more roads in North Somerset? I don't know if anybody can answer that one. I guess it's a private matter.
No, I can answer that one.
Oh, good. Oh, brilliant.
And it's not Virgin, it's City Cable, which are looking at coming to Weston, starting work early next year. And they are a major internet provider, services provider with extremely fast speeds. And they are looking at investing 25 million, I think, into the Weston-super-Mare area. And they are looking at covering all roads, not just most roads. So City Fibre and they work with Virgin. So if you're a Virgin customer, it won't exclude you from using theirs. So they work with TalkTalk and Virgin. But I think we will have full coverage. I was in a meeting today, which it was very clear that Weston-super-Mare as a place will have some of the best internet coverage in the country by the time that these two companies are finished.
Thank you.
Just to add as well, Don, I think up in North Somerset, I believe BT are starting to do something. Again, I know I'm hearing that around the Long Ashton kind of Fayland area in terms of laying more cable down.
Okay. I'm going to ask a couple of questions around, and I think this is a very valid point, and perhaps Jeff, you could answer this, but it may apply more to Mark, around parking. And they are making the point around if people are working from home in certain areas, the difficulty then of parking when they live in restricted parking areas. That's probably more west than anywhere else, I guess.
Yeah, shall I go first and then you?
Yeah, go on,
because
Mark. Yeah.
I was looking at this yesterday, Mark, funnily enough, but yeah, carry on.
Okay, well, it's just to explain that Jeff took over these responsibilities from me a couple of months ago. So we've got and partly this is business too. I think we fully understand the difficulties that residents face who live in the parking zone, and I'm sure Jeff will come on to that in a minute. But we also must remember that we do need to keep parking spaces also clear and turning over for the shops. Because if people can't get to the shops, you won't have a town centre to go to. Now, I know people consider it a really touchy subject, but as Jeff said earlier, you know, we're trying to keep many balls in the air here. I mean, we've got Ash sitting here where we have to, he looks at us if we're not balancing our budgets. You've also got to keep spaces clear for businesses. And then we've also got our residents who are really struggling. But I'm going to leave to Jeff because we are really now, Jeff has really got the handle on residents' parking zones, and I'll let him come in and explain to that to you.
Yes, because I was actually in Weston yesterday looking at a possible first residents parking scheme there. And we were and these are very early days, I should emphasize that, but we are looking at it. And as Mark says, it's very difficult. You've got to balance the requirements of lots of people to use the same parking. I think the bottom line is there's only a limited amount of parking, and you're trying to give that to everybody in the fairest possible way you can. But we do realise that certainly in places in Weston, the balance possibly is swung too far one way, and we're now looking to introduce some residents parking schemes. Just to be clear, a residents parking scheme is not a cure-all. It's not a magic bullet. It will not cure everything. But what we're trying to do is restore a bit of balance so that the people who live in these areas will have somewhere to park. The other thing to say about residents parking, it is not free. We're not looking to make any money out of it, but there will be a charge associated with it, which we'll keep as low as possible. I suppose what people can look at in the interim is the fact that we've already started in Lee Woods to introduce a residents parking there. That's a different reason. That's because of all the commuters who go into Clifton and park on that side of the bridge now, because Bristol has already introduced a lot of restricted parking in Clifton, as people will know. But nonetheless, we're looking to roll this out as fast as we can, but we've got restrictions on budgets and we've got restrictions on resource. But we do know the problems out there and we are looking to address it.
Thank you. Thanks, Jeff. Mandy has asked a question on a completely different subject about what are we doing to help the homeless? COVID is making things so difficult for them. Well, I would say that in terms of North Somerset's response, I'm extremely proud of the way our officers and indeed the people working with us from YMCA and the various charities have helped so many people that have sadly become homeless during this epidemic. We took up the government's challenge about giving housing and accommodation. And sadly, the people that are now out on the streets, and we've had quite a lot of news about that of late, are those who are intentionally homeless and do not wish to be helped by the council. And it's a very, very sad situation, but there are people out there who we cannot help because they do not want to be helped. Our policy is there should be nobody out there for more than one night who hasn't had direct contact with one of our council officers or one of our support workers and have been offered accommodation. And it's a really hard question for me to answer, since if people don't want to be helped, I can't in this country force them to come into accommodation. So I believe that we have been very, very successful in taking an awful lot of people, not only out of rough sleeping, but actually putting about 30 or 40 people actually into supported accommodation. So that road to some sustainability within their lives, of a proper place to live, and then and gain work and experience. So from that point of view, I hope that answers the question, Mandy. You've also asked me a question as well about support for people who have lost their jobs and then are having difficulty paying council tax. I don't know, Ash, would you like to comment on that one?
Yeah, we'll do. There's kind of three aspects to that. So, I mean, I think one thing that we did last year as we were a new council was we upped the support we gave to people who received council tax relief, because we were quite stingy compared to a lot of local authorities. So that was one of our priorities. So people get a big steep discount now off their council tax if they're low on income. So that's important. I think the kind of the second aspect is we do have a kind of a welfare fund. So if people lose their jobs and they're really hard up and need some emergency funding for buying, say, white goods or something like that, then that is available from the council. And finally, that we also top up from central government with a £150 discount as well off council tax. I think that applies to people who are on universal benefits. So, that help is being targeted at people who are on very low incomes or have lost their jobs. And goes most of the way, if not all the way, to removing their council tax liability.
Thank you. I've got a question here from Andy about asking if there's an update on the Marine Lake and the old pier. Now, I suspect Mark may be able to answer the question on the Marine Lake. In terms of the old pier, I presume we're referring to Burnbeck Pier. The council is working very hard to gain a compulsory purchase order on the pier, so that we can then do a back-to-back deal with RNLI to get the pier restored to not only its former glory as a wonderful seaside amenity, but possibly more importantly, get the lifeboat station back to the place where it is the most safe place for it to operate, so we can respond to call outs as quickly as possible from Weston-super-Mare. I'm sure people who live in Weston know just how busy that lifeboat station is and how many people's lives it's saved over very many years. And I think we are extremely grateful to the RNLI for the wonderful work they do, not only locally in Weston and Portishead, but nationwide. But Mark, in terms of the Marine Lake, can you help on that?
Yes, the Marine Lake it's moving forward. It is slow. I don't argue or can't defend the fact that it is slow. It hadn't been considered until this year, when the Mudlarks came forward to the council and said, when I say considered, it was on our wish list. But we've now moved forward. We've got partners who are beginning to help us. It's on the Weston-super-Mare placemaking policy as a priority, and we are now trying to find ways of funding the dredging of the lake itself, which isn't a cheap option, but also the fact that it is a facility that is very desperately needed in Weston-super-Mare. We need it to be a good swimming facility, and there are so many opportunities around the Marine Lake. I mean, we have the one in Clevedon, which we saw this summer. To its own success was a real problem. And we need the same in the Marine Lake. So all I can do at this current time is assure you we are moving ahead on this. And it is something that all Weston members are pushing North Somerset Council for a resolution over, as we need to see it opened up and used for swimming again. Okay.
Now, a more general question around our engagement with the people of North Somerset. And Nicola, did you want to say anything about the citizens panel? Because you've been heading that up for us, and I believe that it's due to be meeting very soon.
As I understand it, there is going to be something to do with the. I'm not quite sure what the question is. I haven't been told what the question is.
Well, just give us an update on the citizens panel.
The environment. They will be meeting the People's Voice, as I think they're now going to be called. They are going well. We've got nearly 500. No, I think the last count was 515. Pretty evenly split, male, female, pretty evenly split, although it's slightly weighted towards females. They are pretty much covering the same demographics as across North Somerset. So when we actually have a large enough group to go by, to split into certain focus groups, certain demographic focus groups, we will be representing North Somerset nicely, I think. Yes.
Lovely, thank you. Now I've had a question here from Emma, who I presume lives in Winscombe, about the changes to home to school transport provision. And can I just make it very clear, we have not cancelled any buses moving children to Churchill School, and we will not do so until there's a safe walking route established. Now, the question is always asked around this about what does that mean? Well, in essence, it's down to what central government dictate to us, because if your child lives more than 3 miles away by a safe walking route from their school, we have to provide transport or some way of getting them into that school safely. What we're doing within the Churchill catchment area is exploring ways of making sure there are safe walking routes to school. Now, we are currently doing some work on the Strawberry line and also with some of the public rights of way in that area to make sure they're safe. And once that work has been completed, we'll then be producing a video which people can have access to see the walking route. Now, the other thing to bear in mind is the government legislation and case law, as it were, does say that it is accompanied. So in other words, the understanding of government is that a child will be accompanied to school, and therefore the walking routes are so designed that the child accompanied by an adult could safely walk there. Now, I think that there's quite a lot of comments been made around this, but we are not going to make the change over for those pupils going to Churchill School until that route has been made safe. But I'm afraid that people's own ideas of what that safe walking route should be compared to what the legal definition of it is may be somewhat different, and we will highlight that within the consultation we will have in terms of explaining which the walking route is. We're also working very hard to make some better cycling routes in that area to encourage children to get to school by either walking or by cycling. But certainly no exception is being made of that area being treated differently to anywhere else in the country. So I hope that answers the question. It may not be the answer you wanted to hear, sadly, but that is the background to it. So I hope that does answer at least your initial question. We had some of the comments about parking, and I do think that we, Jeff, within your remit, we do need to look at the issues around parking in town centres. So I'm trying to find who the question was from. I think it was.
It was Stuart. It was Stuart who was asking the questions.
Well,
yeah.
There's also one person who was doing some shift working as well, which I guess it makes it quite difficult in that regard. So I think when we're designing the residence parking schemes, Jeff, can I just ask that we are cognizant of people's lives aren't or 9 to 5, working in the workplace and then coming back again.
Yes, and there are often people who work in very valuable industries as well, because they're working in hospitals and
yes,
care homes, etc. So we definitely do need to accommodate them.
Okay. There are lots of questions on parking. It's obviously a very contentious matter, isn't it? So I'm just trying to keep an eye on. Again, the question around the Strawberry line. Emma, I'm afraid that the situation is that it has to be a safe walking route to walk down. It isn't a fully lit route. There are children throughout the country who are walking along the lines as set down by the legislation. Ultimately, if we're going to do something different, it would mean the law would have to be changed, and the funding to provide transport would have to come from central government. We are working within an envelope which is laid down by by government legislation. So ultimately, if you want that changing, we'll happily change it if the funding and the law changes come along. So the likes of John Penrose will be better to ask this question of, and sadly not the council. Ash.
I was just about to reiterate that. As on the home to school transport, I wrote to Liam Fox, as he's my local MP, and just said what a mess the home to school funding is for children generally. And although something came back about extra funds for COVID, I mean, it didn't really give me much of an answer. I don't think it's seen as a priority for some reason, which seems crazy because there's some places that need it desperately to be maintained and others where we do need more provision for, safe routes to be built for walking to school, which is generally better when it's only, say, half a mile or something. It's not too far. So I completely agree. We'll push as the council. I think that's fair to say, but we are very tied in this area by central government.
Thank you. I've got a question from Nick, which I will ask. I don't know the answer to this. Any of my colleagues may know, or else we may have to go back to Nick. Nick has said, are funds available for those who've used up all their annual leave allowance and have to care for small children that can't go to nursery because they're isolating? I mean, there is the £500 fund for people who are on some level of benefits who then can claim a £500 fund. That's the only thing I know about. I don't know if any of my colleagues have got any other thoughts.
That's all I'm aware of.
Okay. I mean, again, I'm getting more and more questions about the home to school transport, about the fact it's 3 miles each way. It's what's laid down in legislation as what we have to provide. It may not be deemed to be acceptable, but I can't answer the question by saying I can magically undo the law. Mark, do you want to say something?
I was only going to. I can understand Emma's frustration because she's spoken to her MP sends her to us. And all I really wanted to say to Emma is we do get it. I have used the route. My daughter went to Churchill School and I'm aware of the route. And I know that other colleagues on the council cycle the same sort of route. The government don't seem to want to understand because I have spoken to parliamentarians and they said, well, if children go to school at 8:30, it's light. If they come home at 3:15, it's light. So if we light these places, then they say it'll be a waste of time. And it is frustrating for you because you're being told to come to us, and government does this fairly frequently where they blame the local authority for something because that's the easy cop out because the MP hasn't got an answer. But if, as Don says, if the law has to be changed for us to be able to get the funding and to provide those transports, government have to change that law. We can't. Wouldn't we love to be able to change the law from local government? But we can't. And the fact is, it is frustrating. I do get it. I do know what you're talking about because my daughter went to the same school only a couple of years ago. But the fact is, it has to be done through John Penrose. And you do need to go back to your MPs and say, no, this isn't acceptable. They have clearly stated that that is not the case. And I'm happy to have that conversation with them. I'm sure my colleagues are.
Thank you. I've got a question from Sarah. Again, quite a... oh, the screen's just gone down. Sarah, good evening. I would like to know if there's any funding available for Western Hospice. They are so reliant on donations. So understandably, are not forthcoming at the moment. Matt, perhaps you've got any comments around the general situation in relation to hospices? I mean, questions about PPE, for example.
Yeah, so I think it's one of those areas where it is difficult, certainly for charitable organisations. We recognise the disruption there's been in terms of normal funding routes and some of the infrastructure that's around and support them. I think in terms of PPE and other mechanisms, then if there are specific questions that they've got, then they could send those in to us. We could talk to our colleagues in adult social care about what routes we're using to supply, but there are specific conditions around the money that's been allocated to local government in terms of what we're there to support, as opposed to any wider systems where there may be other support mechanisms direct from government. So we might need to take that one away and look into it in a bit more detail Certainly in terms of infection control, there's been some wider support for hospices, but whether it's specific grants or specific allocations of PPE, I'd need to look into that for her, I think.
Okay. I mean, I think it's just extremely difficult for the hospice movement more generally. I'm very well aware of the hospice in Weston and the wonderful work they do, but I do realise how dependent they are on fundraising. Mark.
Don, I was just going to say I'll try get Ash and I to pick that up and see if there's any routes to funding through any of the business grants because of the important, because in the last round of grants, of course, charities were supported. I don't think there have been in this one, but Ash and I'll pick that up.
Okay, I mean, going back to grants, Mark and Ash, perhaps. Jessica's asking, are we aware of any more grants for small businesses that are going to be coming through? I'm not, but you two are closer to this than me.
They're getting fed up with me, Ash. Do you want to go with it, or
no? You go. Okay. You go for it. You know it well, and you speak well.
So the grants that you're currently getting, there are two types. The ARG grant is the grant that which we can keep awarding. If your business is significantly affected by COVID, it will be awarded through January, February, and March until we're out of this. We have been given a level of funding which we do have to make stretch, and there are a lot of businesses in North Somerset. We do have to make that stretch through the period. So if you've had a funding now and you in January are still struggling, or in January you still are having real difficulties keeping your business going, we want to help you do that. So come back, reapply. If you're a business rate payer, it will be more automatic. We will keep, if we get left in tier 3, the government will refund us to give business rates payers additional funds. So, but as we come down the tiers, those conditions change because we should be trying to get back to some normality in terms of trade and business. So yes, there is multiple awarding schemes, and yes, we will be putting it out all the time that we want you to try and apply for those. And in fairness, as you keep applying, it gets simpler because the information you have got is already on the system and it recognizes that. So you should find it easier.
Can I just add in to what Mark says? Please do apply. And I'm quite aware that because we had to get things up and running quite quickly, it can be a bit confusing to some people, particularly if they're not, financially minded. So I think please apply. Email Mark and me if you're having any problems, and we'll keep an eye on the application. We're doing that for a number of people, and every week we review borderline applications because we want to exercise as much discretion as possible to help people. So please do get in contact.
Okay, and the website, is that the In North Somerset website, the full details?
The quickest way into it, Don, is to go to just the North Somerset. Just search North Somerset Council, go onto their front page, and you'll see business and business support on the front page. The team have put it up there right in the way to try and help all businesses. And this is available to all businesses that have been significantly impacted. As I said, I for example, exampled taxi drivers to show that it is all businesses. So if you have been significantly impacted, we can help with your costs.
Okay. I've got another question on electric charging for cars, about what pressure we can put on supermarkets to provide charging facilities. And again, I don't know the answer to that question. I guess, Jeff, you've gone off mute, so are you aware?
I'm not sure I'm not sure we can put any pressure on them at all, Don, because they're private businesses, but a lot of them do seem to do this. I know that the Tesco's in Clevedon has got 4 charging points in there. I think it's probably in their interest to put them in because it's almost an ideal opportunity for people to charge their cars while they're shopping. I think that's going to be a feature of what happens in the future, that you're going to get people charging where they're doing something for a period of time, because obviously it takes a while to charge the car. Okay. I will investigate though. I'll take it away and ask the question, Don. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much for that, Jeff. Matt, I know we've gone over the tiering system at the beginning. I think one of you may have just joined us a little bit later. I've been asked by Lorna, do you think we will drop into tier 2 on the 17th of December? Well, I guess that question is to some extent dependent on what central government thinks of the numbers in their black box, as it was described to me a couple of days ago.
Yeah, I think that is true. It's very hard for us to know exactly. What we can show is the fact that our infection rates come down in North Somerset, and that's good news, both within our general population and our older population. Our test positivity rates come down, so there are encouraging signs about how lockdown has had an impact and the continued impact probably of tier 3 as well. So, but we know there's still pressure in the health and care system. It always is at winter, but COVID is another dimension in terms of capacity, both in terms of beds, but also around staff as well, because you'll have staff members who are absent because of COVID or having to self-isolate because of COVID. So these are all things that create pressure in the system. So all of those things will be taken into account, but ultimately it's hard for us to predict. What we will just do is make sure we're ready to respond, whether we stay the same or we go into tier 2.
Okay, and do we have any news yet on the vaccine process? Clearly it started at Southmead, I believe, yesterday. That was our most local one, but have we any, I guess it depends also on which vaccine we're using, doesn't it?
Yes, it's a huge logistical challenge, but lots and lots of work is going in to try and work out how quickly we can meet the needs and working our way down the priority list. And I suppose what is really encouraging is that the recognition of care homes, both the staff and the residents in those care homes right at the top of that list, as well as then people based on age where there is greater risk the older you are in terms of harm from COVID. So all of that's being factored in. But there are practical issues with the vaccine, the only one that's licensed so far, having to be stored at such a low temperature. So it's building this infrastructure as we go. It's learning as we go in terms of what are new ways that you can move the vaccine around, how effectively you have to do it. But also it's about making sure we don't waste any vaccine, because clearly it's very precious. So you want to build a system that can cope and be predictable in terms of the numbers of people, and you don't waste any vaccines. So that is going to take a bit of time, but I just think it's incredible what's been done so far. It's a huge thing to celebrate this week that we are starting a process, but I suppose I just encourage people to keep thinking about this as the start of a long journey rather than we're there and it's going to be okay. It's going to take a long time to get through all of the priority groups and into the wider population. So we've just got to keep going with all the things that we can control, like our social distancing, like the use of face coverings, like our everyday hygiene. If we get all that right, we are creating the best environment to capitalise quickly on the benefits of the vaccine. But if we lose our focus on those behaviours, then we create the risk of putting more pressure in a system and causing more harm and ultimately more death, because people will die from COVID over the coming months and in greater numbers if we don't stick to those same behaviours.
Okay, thank you. Matt's asking, why are we introducing a £50 charge for collecting green waste from next year? Well, I think the simple answer is, Matt, that it's cost us an awful lot of money to do that. There is no statutory obligation for green waste to be collected free of charge. In fact, North Somerset Council has the lowest council tax rate in the whole of the South West, and also I think it's the only council now that doesn't charge for green waste to be collected. So we will be introducing a charge. It is entirely optional. Nobody has to do it. In fact, we'd very much like that people spent the time of doing that instead to do home composting, and we will be supplying to those that want them home composting bins at a very small charge, so they can actually make use of that and then save money on having to buy compost from outside suppliers. The other issue, of course, is in a council in which we've got to save something like £17 million over the next couple of years, is that doing things that don't have statutory requirements to be done, when actually everybody currently pays for their council tax for green waste, even if they live in a flat or a house without a garden or do not have a green waste bin. There is a degree of unfairness about that, whereas the other collections of both recycling and waste are pretty much universal. I know it's not popular, but it is part of our way of addressing the financial challenge we have, and also around some of our climate change. Because what we'd like to do is to stop moving stuff around unnecessarily, because we do move an awful lot of green waste around the country, which would be much preferred to be dealt with actually in the places it gets produced. And it is an optional charge. So I hope that answered the question. I'm going to ask a final question from John. John says, what will North Somerset be doing to help support and promote localised business to help commercial growth and bring Weston back to where it once was? I think I'm going to widen that out to the whole of North Somerset, because that is one of the key parts of our agenda, is to how do we bring much more growth and business into North Somerset as a whole. And of course, Weston is by far our biggest town. That is a key part of that. So shall I start with you, Mark, as you live right slap bang in the middle of Weston, but I will ask everybody for their own thoughts on this.
Yeah, and I'll be quick because I know we're heading to the end. John, it is a really interesting question, and I could spend hours talking to you about this because it's something that is close to me, being a retailer for 37 years. But we're doing quite a lot in Weston now, and the question is, how do you bring people back, especially people who live near the motorway, where it is nearly as quick to go to Bristol than it is to go to Weston, and how do we start encouraging those people back into town? One of the biggest problems, you did put on your message that you would like, how do we bring back Weston as it once was? That will never happen, I'm afraid, because the supermarkets drag about 80% of anything that was spent in Weston when you're talking about out of Weston and shoving it in their head offices in London. And hence the reason London is such a wealthy place and the rest of us find that money has disappeared. So that type of town will never come back. And the reason it won't come back is simply because we don't spend our money in the high street like we used to. So high streets have to change. What we're doing in Weston particularly, and I'll let my colleagues discuss what they're doing in their areas, we are looking at further regeneration. We are looking at Alexandra Parade and how we can make it easier for people to jump onto buses and come into Weston and not have to search around for bus stops, so they can jump on one bus and jump off and jump back on and know where they're going to go home from, rather than having to look around. And of course, the major piece of work we're doing is the placemaking policy for Weston, which is gathering huge support. And the council have invested quite a lot into this because we need people to understand that we are on the same journey, but we cannot go on that journey on our own. If the council have done that far too many times in the past, if they can't take the residents and the businesses with them, then we're not going to get anywhere with it. And so we do have to go on that journey together. And if you are interested in Weston, John, and how it runs, please get engaged with that placemaking policy and the organisation, the placemaking steering group, because we are trying to find really successful ways to start driving trade back into Weston, like recommissioning part of the Sovereign Centre to drive footfall into the Sovereign Centre. It's going to be a different high street. It won't be the same. And just as a quick final, 40 years ago when I first came to Weston as a boy, it's 50 years ago now, we used to have 9 fishmongers, 26 butchers, and all those sort of places, but they've all gone because we buy pre-packed meats from our supermarkets and pre-packed fish from our supermarkets. So I'm not blaming the consumer. That's just the way it goes. That's just how society has moved on for speed and convenience. But we can't tend to have both. So we just got to find ways of making our high streets work in a slightly different way.
Were the candlestick makers still there when, Mark, or are they already gone?
They'd gone.
All right. Nicola, the Portishead view. Let's go to the frozen north.
Well, one of the things we're doing with our neighbourhood plan, the way our steering groups are working with our neighbourhood plan, we are really, really looking to encourage SMEs into our town so that we can keep people working local, keep people shopping local, and then that would solve our traffic problem. That's the way we're looking at it anyway.
Lovely.
But we need to concentrate on behaviour change as much as anything. We need people to think about shopping locally. With this in mind, Councillor Cato has actually organised through Eventbrite a talk tomorrow night on shopping locally. We need to think about the USPs that small town shops have. The joy of going and shopping locally, the joy of going to your corner shop, the joy of shopping on your high street, and the community that actually grows. The being on your high street grows your community. It grows the businesses. It all spirals into something wonderful. We're in the middle of looking at a brownfield site in Portishead. We're looking at ways we can encourage small and medium enterprises into that area. We're looking at what we can do with that area to encourage growth. Growth is happening in Portishead, but it's going to be happening in the right way with employment.
Thank you. Jeff, do you want to say it from a Clevedon viewpoint?
Yes, certainly do, Don. I think in Clevedon, what we've got in hand are some changes for Hill Road and the beach. Changes for Hill Road to make it one way. These are obviously still in consultation, but we're trying to make the area around Hill Road, Alexandra Road, a unique experience where you've got interesting shops you can go to that you can't find anywhere else. I'm working with Clevedon Bid on that one as well. In terms of the centre, people will probably be aware that there's an application shortly going to be in, a major application about changing what's around the B&M building. I'm still not convinced that's a very good idea, but obviously, as Mark says, Clevedon is not going to be as it was because the way that shopping works now is different. I'll just say one more thing. The Sunday market, which we have every first Sunday in every month, took place last week, and I think it was probably the biggest one I've ever seen, frankly. I think it was people were released from what they'd been doing before, and there were more stalls, there were more people, probably perhaps for Matt's purposes, too many people, but it was certainly successful. So I'm hoping that those sort of things and the events that we've been talking about will help to bring people back.
Okay. Ash, do you want to say from a village point of view?
Yeah, I can do. I was going to say something more generally,
Okay.
because my portfolio has assets in it. I mean, since Mark handed them over to me, and I think it's surprising what North Somerset actually owns or has an influence over. So in Weston, which was the original part of the question, the Sovereign Centre, we applied for and got well over £1.5 million of funding to do something called the Western General Stores at some point. So that's good. We've done Burnbeck. Work on the Marine Lake. Hopefully there'll be an announcement soon on the Seaquarium, and then top of the list after that will be Tropicana, of course. So there is that. But I think that's the key thing, is working together with parishes and towns to work out how we use the assets that we've got. And it's surprising how just something quite small from the perspective of North Somerset might be quite valued to a local community, and using that for businesses as well. Small plots of land that we've got, say, in Nailsea and Long Ashton that I know of, you know, can be really, really useful. So we'll be working on that really, really actively, and trying to get local support in for things.
Thank you, Ash. I mean, I'll just finish off from a village point of view of Pill. I try to do all my shopping at the wonderful selection of shops we have in the village, and I think that I get very good service and very good prices at the ones I visit there. I think in terms of your question, John, you do ask us perhaps at a crossroads, because it is very likely that people will be less keen to work in big cities. They found they can work from home. Businesses are more likely to want cheaper accommodation for much smaller meetings, and perhaps they have from very large office blocks in the middle of Bristol and the other big cities. So I'm sure there is an opportunity for North Somerset to grasp, and we are very much aware of it in terms of wider business development. But I guess ultimately the question sits with all of us, doesn't it? You know, why do we go out of North Somerset to buy things when we can get the vast majority of things we need within North Somerset? I mean, people say to me, oh, I could just go up to Cribbs, but just going up to Cribbs from Weston is probably the thick end of 50, 60 mile round trip. Now, there's an impact on the climate of doing that. There's an impact on your wallet of doing that, isn't there? And though the choice may be allegedly greater, if every penny we can spend within North Somerset is helping North Somerset and helps North Somerset businesses and the people who work within those businesses. So I think the council can do, as we've explained, as much as we possibly can, but the 200,000 people who live in North Somerset will also decide whether we're successful or not. So thank you for that question. I'm now going to wish you all goodbye. We've gone past 7 o'clock by quite a long way. So I'd like to wish you all a very Merry Christmas on behalf of my colleagues here. I hope Matt Lenny's words about making choices at Christmas to keep us all safe are still ringing in your ears, as indeed they are in mine. So have a very happy and safe Christmas and New Year, and we look forward to seeing all of you again in January. I don't know if any of my colleagues want to add to that. My happy Christmas bonhomie.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas also. Thanks
Merry
very
Christmas.
much and have a very good evening. Thank you. Bye-bye.